not good, but like as far as you never see it coming, basically, this kid. And that's refreshing to me that it's not the bad kid. Like in Chronicle, the bad kid, the poor kid goes bad. And so it's refreshing to watch. Not refreshing to watch, but it's a different spin that this isn't the super nerdy kid. And it's not the super jockey kid. It's just a kid who people seem to like, people seem to know, people are chill with, and it all goes bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of interesting because even the dynamic, Mark, between Zach, Josh, Charlie, who's a middle school kid, and Daryl. Daryl is like he's like the mentally slow kid who has no filter, and you get the feeling he's like hanging out with them because, it's like, his mom said, it's like all the moms had an agreement to let Daryl play with their kids kind of thing. It's obvious he's not really the popular one in this little group. So he's kind of like the lowest probably on the totem pole in terms of social strata is concerned. So.
And he's so boisterous, though. It's really interesting. He probably internalizes a lot of things inside. Yeah. And maybe the way he acts so boisterous is kind of a coping technique or a way to get attention and kind of show up. So, I mean, who knows what's going on in his brain? Yeah. But this kid, oh my gosh, Daryl's just a motor mouth. The things that comes out of his mouth, oh my gosh. And it's pretty interesting, too, when they're talking, it's Josh and Zach. And I think it's really interesting. And the way I open this up is when Josh tells Zach, you just say a bunch of stuff that sounds nice because you're scared all the time. I think it's interesting how Zach throughout is just saying, Daryl's a good kid. He's just, but Daryl's not a good kid. And when they're talking about the drug dealer kid who gets killed later on.
Yeah, John Whitcomb.
Yeah, John Whitcomb, when he gets killed, he's like, he's a good kid. He's just with a bad crowd. He seems to be a very interesting sort of apologist. He has those excuses, I guess, right? He makes these, he has these interesting excuses for everybody in this.
It's like he's giving allowances to people, like giving everybody their he's kind of like, look on the bright side kind of this person instead of focusing on the negative. And he kind of reminds me, Mark, maybe this is why I resonate with this movie, is because he kind of reminded me of me. I was kind of like the one, if there were three kids and, if I was with two other people and the two other people didn't like each other, I'd be trying to mediate between the two of them to sort of like deflect conflict in a way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. You were the go-between.
Yeah, to keep kind of like an even, I don't know, mood or whatever in a situation, kind of, rather than it's like, oh God, we got to fight over something stupid. Yeah.
I got to deal with, you know what I mean? I got to deal with, like, yeah. But you know what's interesting when you do that? I was just thinking about this. When you do that, you make allowances for the wrong side sometimes. Like, guys, let's just get along. And so is that, you know what I mean? But you're young. You're just, you aren't thinking in regards to that until you're probably our age. But it's interesting. Yeah, you're right. He's like that. He's just saying he's fine. He's okay. But these kids are jerks, and they were really rough on Josh, right? And the whole time Zach is trying to be almost an apologist for both sides. But Josh is more of an open type personality.
Yeah, I kind of like the moment where they're at Josh's house and Daryl's going on about bagel bites, and Josh is sitting there saying, I don't like them. They burn my mouth. It's just kind of like he says what's on his mind, but he doesn't always say it in that like confrontational way until things kind of ramp up during that scene in the park. So yeah, and then it spirals off from there, I think.
And then Daryl's like, "You're eating them wrong."
Yeah, you guys are lame.
I love his cadence. Max Talisman's cadence in that. It was a very interesting way that he talked. I really liked, it was an interesting performance by that kid. He was very, by today's standards, like, man, this kid's horrible. But by 90s standards, talking about True Lies and all that kind of stuff, like, this is a kid you knew in the 90s. I mean, if you were a feral child of the 90s, you definitely knew this kid, I would say.
The thing is, Mark, it's like, I think another thing about this movie is, we're talking about the 90s, and I'm like, a lot of the stuff that goes on in this movie, I have memories of watching, terribly scrambled Cinemax softcore, on my TV. It's just like stuff like that. And just like the stupid thing of like trying something gross from a convenience store. And it's like everybody has to try some because it's like kind of this follow the leader kind of thing. It's like, oh, well, I'm not I'm not a wimp. I'm going to try this dried squid. I'm going to do this too. I'm going to talk about, sit with my best friend and, talk about the girls in class in the yearbook or whatever. It was kind of like, that's kind of how things were in a strange way. It's like, this is kind of indicative of certain things that I went through, in my own adolescence. So I think that's another thing that kind of hit so heavily, is that, Collins and Piotrowski really kind of nailed that sensibility of that specific time really well.
I like the squid scene too, because everyone overreacts to it like it's the worst thing ever. But then Josh eats it, because Josh seems quite comfortable. Well, I don't know if he is comfortable with who he is, but he speaks his mind for sure. Yeah. And he is more confrontational than Zach is. And he's the only one who didn't react as if it was the worst thing that ever touched their lips. And that was just another interesting scene with them. But I think with the limited time, I think Kevin Phillips did a really good job. I mean, even the intro of this film where the deer busts through the glass window and the cop kills it, it just snaps its neck. He creates the score and just the mood that Phillips creates. And I know Phillips wasn't the DP on this movie, but Phillips, dude, he has shot Childish Gambino videos. I mean, this guy has shot the who's who of music videos. So I thought that was pretty cool. And the cinematography by Eli Bourne, you can just tell he and Phillips were sort of simpatico, or, they were on the same page in the film. And I love the mood that's created. And I have a quick question for you, Johnny.
Yeah, sure.
Do you think it's the mood that sort of carries this film? Because we talk about the ending, and the ending does come fast, and I still like it. And after reading interviews I listened to a 40-minute interview with the director and Campbell and Tahan, and then I read some really great read a really good interview with the writers. But for me, this movie's really drenched in mood, and that's why I love it. Like, does Josh's, I love that we don't see his descent, Josh's. Like, we're never with him, so we don't see the turmoil in his head. And I love that idea, but I don't think that the execution didn't wow me, but I still love the movie. I don't know. Did the execution get you really well with that? Well, I mean, not literal. Well, there's a literal execution. Hey, real quick, before we get into this, and then we'll get into this question, but I got to get this off my mind. There's a theory out there that Allison, played by Elizabeth Cappuccino, but they call her Cap, that she was working with Josh to get him to do all this.
Really? Okay, so that's what you messaged me about. Okay, yeah.
And there's videos that have thousands of views. And
wow.
No. So the writers were talking about her. They said the Allison character specifically could have easily fallen into some variation of the manic pixie dream girl if we weren't careful. The audience could only see her when Zach sees her, and his perspective of women at his age is limited and somewhat naive. It's also innocent in a way. And we tried to maintain that innocence rather than fall into idealization, which does happen. This pursuit naturally led to Kevin's idea of ending and beginning the movie with her on her own, outside of Zach's perspective, which is really interesting. One friend actually told me he was frustrated with how we wrote her until he got to the final scenes and we realized we had been intentional in our choices. So I don't think she falls into the manic pixie dream thing, but I don't think in any way she's responsible for this rampage.
No, I that thought never even crossed my mind as a possibility. I mean, there's that one moment close to the end where she says, Zach's walking her home and Zach's talking about John Whitcomb and all that stuff and what's happened. And, she says to him, I like Josh, but I like you too. And I like you a lot sometimes. So that's like the only thing I could really pull out of the whole movie where you could maybe make an inference that something's going on there, but not for a second did I think there was some sort of conspiracy going on against a Zach or whatever. That just seems. I mean, more power to the people who are invested in this, but I don't see that at all.
I guess it spreads the word of this film, but it just seems like a misguided theory. And I mean, and listen, a lot of people are like, well, Josh didn't kill Allison. Right, Josh killed Megan, and
though they make it kind of hard to tell. I noticed. But yeah.
And so Allison at the end, though, she has the 3 scars on her neck, and when you watch the film, you notice that she touches the back of her neck a lot. And if Josh had a crush on her, he would know that about her because he does seem very observant. Yeah. So he might have done that. Just in this fit of rage of like, you're mine, you're not Zach's, so you will remember me. He didn't kill her, but he did that very specifically knowing that she does that. I don't think he would do that to her if they were in league together. It's just the weirdest theory, man. And I think he did that as a power, as a cruel thing to do. Just, you will remember me type Scar.
Yeah, I agree with that, Mark. I thought what happened was I thought maybe I'm misremembering this because it happened so fast. Because I was thinking he had like Christmas lights around her neck, but maybe it was just he bound her wrists and ankles with Christmas lights. So yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, and I can see that.
And he put the bathing suit top on her face that he pulled out earlier, and she told him to put it back. Yeah, so that was just a cruel maneuver from the kid.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of, you know what's interesting? I've been reading so many reviews where like it's an idyllic world, and they just talk about Donnie Darko. They talk about Stand By Me more often than not. What's the Lars von Trier, Willem Dafoe, Antichrist?
Yeah.
And then at the end, and then it goes off the rails at the end. And I don't think it goes off the rails at the end. And you know what's interesting? You have Stand By Me.
Yeah.
And so every movie after the next 40 years with kids, like, that's Stand By Me. It's just, it's not a Stand By Me movie at all. These kids are older. I mean, there's a dead body, but they're not going to look for it. It's just the dread. It's more of like a Hitchcock meets.
Yeah.
I get the Donnie Darko vibe, but that was still the 80s.
This doesn't at all have like the sci-fi fantasy vibe that Donnie Darko has. I really don't understand the Donnie Darko thing, because that was used in the trailer too. It was like, oh, it's this Donnie Darko meets Stand By Me or something like that. I'm like, really? Okay.
Yeah. You know what's interesting with comparisons, Johnny Numb, and I like saying Johnny because you say Mark a lot, so I like saying Johnny Numb. I like it. It makes me sound smart. You know what, Mark? Yeah, I think it's good. So I do think comparisons are a way to get people, oh, okay, cool. I know those movies. But I also think they set very unfair expectations because.
Yeah.
So, and also, what if people haven't seen them? It's Stand By Me meets In the Mood for Love meets Shotgun Stories. What? Daredevil is about that? I don't even know what those are. So it's a dangerous game to play, but Stand By Me, it's not. And Donnie Darko, it's not. It seems, okay, Johnny Darko. Johnny Numb, do me a favor. Give me a DVD quote for this movie.
Oh man. Okay.
And you recommended it, so it's on you. You gotta give me something good. I mean, we know that your power is untethered and ever growing.
I know, and the only thing I ask is if this comes out good, that the filmmakers use it when someone finally picks this up for distribution in a nice Blu-ray format. It's like a blade of nostalgia slicing through 90s sensibilities.
Whoa, yes, Johnny Numb, go do a lap.
Okay,
go do it right now. What?
I'm doing it from my seat, like I'm pistoning my legs and pumping my arms. Yeah.
No, I love it.
Yeah, my cat's watching me. She's not impressed. Yeah.
Yeah, my cat's sleeping too. She's awake. She's looking out the window. But they I don't know. We're reading the reviews for this film, and I'm very happy that it has a 90% plus tomato meter score. It has a cool. Like a 6 point something IMDb score. So people do like it. Mm-hmm. I just hate being reductive. I think sometimes when I was reading interviews too, like, remind me of this, remind me of that. And the writers are so gracious because Ben and Luke were like, well, I guess that movie must have been in our mind when we were writing it. And it's
yeah. So not to interrupt, but I think what you're getting at is like they just had this story in their heads. They wrote the story, and kind of anything that came out of any comparisons were just incidental. Mm-hmm. It's like I think when you put yourself in that headspace of writing something, it's like unless you're like Brian De Palma or somebody like that, or the Duffer Brothers, you're not thinking, okay, quote Indiana Jones here, quote Hitchcock here, quote
Jaws poster there.
Quote Gremlins here, it's like in
Ghostbusters there.
Scene 55, it's like Gozer surrogate comes out and threatens 11. It's stuff like that. I feel like that's kind of cool. I think because I didn't feel that when I was watching this. I mean, I did feel like a superficial Stand By Me vibe, but just more in terms of like it's a bunch of characters kind of going on this coming of age journey. But this one I feel is much darker than per the title, much darker than Stand By Me.
If I had to pitch this movie, it would be Elephant meets Antichrist.
That's good. I like that.
Imagine if I saw that on a poster, I'm watching it.
Oh, that's just like mashing up two